All right, I'm back, and I am going to be doing some strikes. It is Void, Grenadier, and I think Arc Threat. Uh, and I just realized I haven't done any of the mods, but I got to do some bounties. It's an auto rifle, pulse rifle. Okay. Uh, yeah, so I am actually sitting in front of my tablet right now trying to sync up all of the clips from Wednesday's live stream, still going. I did one that it took all night to sync. Like I started it before I went to bed, woke up, and it was done, but it didn't work properly. And this one I started as soon as I got up, sometime around like 10 this morning, and it's still going like 4 hours later. So I don't know. It'd be nice if if there was a time code sync. I don't know if it's interesting. I wonder if StreamYard does provide a time code. I don't think I changed my artifact mods. Let me check. Nope. I probably shouldn't be changing them in the middle of a fight, but okay. Uh, why do I have that there? Uh, yeah. Okay. Okay. So on this point, let me find something to listen to. Let me just.
Closet studio watching this because your dad died. Now you're singing about him.
The original sort of viral clip, right, was that English guy who comes up. Simon Cowell's like, "So you're gonna sing opera?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Where do you work now?" He's like, "I work at Car Phone Warehouse," which I guess is like the equivalent of the Verizon store or something like that in the United States.
Who was that guy?
Just some dude with looked really insecure, looked like a total schlep. His teeth were very sort of like not straight. You could tell.
Paul Potts.
What's his name?
Paul Potts.
Paul Potts. Yeah, he just looked like a guy who had never really done much with himself, and he wasn't. He was working at Car Phone Warehouse, right? And he just slayed he did that opera piece to the point where you're like moved to tears, right? And you've never rooted for somebody so hard. And then Simon Cowell's like, "Wow, so you're working at Car Phone Warehouse," and everybody in the audience is just cracking up because they're so happy this guy's just absolutely murdered it with his talent.
That's so sweet. See, I love that. I love that stuff.
They're good at constructing that stuff. All right.
Anyway,
parting ways with somebody you care about, back to breakups, right? It can sometimes feel like a death, right? Sometimes it's even worse than a death because you know the person is still alive. You just can't see or call or text them anymore. It's a weird concept. There's real grief in breakups. Grief over losing the other person. Grief over losing the life you had, the life you thought you'd have. Grief over the version of yourself that you were with that person. Breakups are rough, man, but they're super interesting because 9 times out of 10, they force you to put your life back together in a new way. What happens after a breakup is often some of the most important work that we do. We reconnect with friends. We throw ourselves into our work. We seek out new ideas and people and experiences and realize what we really want. Stop eating Captain Crunch 6 times a day. Maybe we graduate to something like some kashi, keep it a morning thing. Going through a breakup is almost like shedding an exoskeleton or something along those lines and molting into a new person, hopefully a better person, all because that other person is no longer there. Anyway, the more we talked about it, the more Gabe and I realized how fascinating breakups and breakdowns really are. So we decided to do a whole Feedback Friday episode just about the breakup stories you guys have shared with us recently. Romantic, social, professional, existential. An episode all about the ends of things and the interesting new beginnings that they create. All right, some doozies, fun ones. Let's dive in. Gabe, what is the first thing out of the mailbag?
Dear Jordan and Gabe, my best friend is a guy named Richard, and we've moved through many life stages together, starting in junior high with relatively low conflict. I have another close friend, Jessica, whom I met at the end of high school. She was Richard's friend first, but she quickly became part of our friend group. At the beginning, Jessica and I hung out together a lot and actually ended up getting a bit physically intimate. Then another one of our friends revealed to Jessica that Richard had feelings for her. Ever since, Richard and Jessica have been in a pretty healthy and stable long-term relationship. I've put my feelings for Jessica aside and enjoyed a more distanced friendship with her. Then, about a month ago, Richard moved across the country for his seasonal summer job.
Oh man, here we go. Tale as old as time.
Jessica and I started to grow very close over late night long conversations and fun nights at the billiards hall. It didn't take long before our competitive banter turned into flirting and we hooked up.
Yeah, song as old as rhyme, banging your girlfriend. There it is. A whole movie montage played in my head just now with a little Disney theme song, culminating in you two collapsing onto a bed together. You know that aerial camera with it in the hair? Yeah. So, all right, let's see what happens.
Dick move, right? But here's the thing. Jessica and Richard are in an open relationship.
Okay.
Interesting, okay?
Interesting, but I'm going to guess that doesn't mean Richard is cool with his girlfriend sleeping with his best friend since 7th grade. I'm just going to go out and ye old limb here.
Fair assumption. The letter goes on. Their only rule thus far has been no sleeping with people we know.
Cool. Nailed it.
Cool. Tight.
Yeah.
But Jessica has come to feel uncomfortable and disconnected with strangers. She tells me that the only people she feels comfortable getting intimate with are the friends she knows and trusts, and that she hadn't really gotten an opportunity to bring this up to Richard before he left.
Yeah, I just forgot to mention that little detail before he boarded his flight to Pennsylvania for his seasonal apple picking job. Sorry, babe. That whole don't shag people we know thing. I don't love Tinder. I can only get it in with people that we've had movie night with who you've known for a decade or more.
Love you. Safe flight.
Yeah, exactly.
Waves through the airplane window.
Oh my god. So sorry, don't mean to get ahead of ourselves here. There's a lot happening and I can't contain myself. Just flagging that Jessica's also playing a role in this as well.
I feel the same way as Jessica. Not me. This is a letter again. I feel the same way as Jessica. To us, that's the kind of connection that makes physical intimacy enjoyable, meaning with people they know.
Mhm.
All that said, we both feel that our connection is not romantic and that Richard is the obvious choice for Jessica as a long-term partner. But we both want the freedom to explore this rather than shame ourselves out of these feelings, which could come out in less healthy ways like resentment or jealousy.
Well, okay, I'm really trying to be quiet over here, but first of all, there are other ways of managing your feelings than shaming yourself for them, although it's interesting that seems to be like their only alternative that they can think of.
Right.
And sure, resentment, jealousy, very normal, very common feelings, but you can work through those too, right? I don't know if resentment or jealousy are inherently unhealthy. I think what's more unhealthy is making choices that you think will help you avoid them because they seem so unpleasant.
Good point.
Anyway, I'm not judging you here, I'm just noticing.
Immediately afterward, we told Richard the news. He wrote to us saying he was going to be radio silent for a bit, that he's processing this slowly, and that it's been rough. Yeah, dude's probably going through it. This brutal, worst apple picking season ever, I would imagine.
Those summer varieties just don't taste quite as good when you know your best friend is railing your girlfriend back home, do they? Oh, Richard. Well, you wanted an open relationship, bud. This sounds like so many open relationship stories that we see in our inbox or that I've seen on Reddit. It's just, this stuff has to be managed so carefully.
Yeah, I mean, live by the sword, die by the sword, I guess.
Literally, yes, in this case.
Now we're left waiting and wondering how badly we've hurt this important person in our life while feeling scared to continue exploring. It seems to me that we either need to get this out of our systems and face the consequences or revert back to a more distanced friendship. I'm hesitant about any middle ground. I don't think I'm a very disciplined person, and I worry that I'll lose control of myself again.
Yes, literal metaphorical sword. Oh, that is interesting. This is something you might want to look at. I mean, call me crazy, but you don't have to bang your friend's girlfriend if you have a crush on her. You could also not do it. You could be a disciplined person if you choose to be. But keep going. I do think there's probably more to this.
I don't know. I'm getting mixed signals here. I want to say that there are some big feelings that he can't ignore, but then he's also saying we're not right for each other and this is not romantic.
We've acknowledged that this is totally not a romantic thing. And I'm like, I don't believe you.
Well, let's circle back to that.
Yeah.
The letter goes on. I think the root of this is that I'm a recovering people pleaser and nice guy and have found more stability by expressing my desires and going for what I want. Okay, that's interesting. So he's tired of being a pushover, kind of, and not going after what he wants. And this whole experience has made him feel more alive, right? More empowered. I get that. It's still really very messy, but it doesn't forgive what he did, but it does help explain why he did it.
For sure. This is not the first guy to get into dicey territory chasing a girl that he's drawn to. It's complicated stuff.
But I think I've also developed some pretty nasty qualities as a result. Something about putting myself first, especially in this situation, has made me want to be a better person in the situations that matter.
Yeah, dude, you're growing. You did something that has some pretty serious consequences for somebody you care about. And now you're going, how should I conduct myself? This is what your 20s are about. I actually do commend you for wanting to learn from this.
I do too. This is going to be a formative experience, this whole thing.
Yeah.
Letter goes on. So now I'm torn between protecting Richard and wanting to connect with Jessica. I think I would hate myself if I lost my best friend or if I caused them to break up, but I also don't know that I would.
Okay, well, there's the big wrinkle here, just how much Richard means to you. I don't know that I'd hate myself if I lost my best friend or stole his girlfriend. Therein lies the rub.
Again, literally.
Get your mind out of the gutter. The puns are too easy with this.
Yeah, apologies. So what do I do here? Do I restrain myself from hanging out with Jessica, losing the closest friend I have right now to avoid the temptation of sleeping with her again? Do I submit to my desires and potentially lose my best friend, but in turn learn my lesson for good? Or is the best path somewhere in between? Signed, putting both F's in BFF.
Okay, despite the fact that we were being a little tough on you while Gabe read your letter, I actually think this is a very common story. You're not a total a-hole. Open relationships often lead to precisely these types of conflicts. I also feel Jessica is equally culpable here. And honestly, so much of what you're describing is just typical mid-20s crap. You're having a lot of these feelings and experiences for the first time. You're figuring out your desires, your values, your emotions. I cut you some slack because this stuff takes time. And to your point, it's often by making mistakes and hurting people that you realize what kind of guy you actually want to be. So we're not gonna demonize you here, but we will try to keep it real. Basically, you fell for your best friend's girl. Like I said, tale as old as time. This is a classic love triangle and it creates an interesting choice, whether to pursue your feelings for this person or whether to do right by your best friend. Now, the Midwestern Boy Scout in me wants to go, look, man, this is your best friend since middle school. What the hell are you doing chatting with this girlfriend on the phone at 1 o'clock in the morning, playing pool with her for hours, then hooking up with her? What is wrong with you? But the Feedback Friday guy who's made some of these types of mistakes, not this exact thing, thankfully. We've all done dumb crap as a kid, right? That guy, me, wants to go, look, you were crushing on this girl. Her boyfriend was was away. You were both drawn to each other. Life is crazy. Maybe you had to make this mistake to learn some things. Hopefully you learned the right things.
I think both of those responses are appropriate. This can all be true at the same time.
Yeah, I guess the line I'm trying to walk is, can we recognize that this was an objectively shitty thing to do to your best friend and for Jessica to do to her boyfriend, full stop, and that wanting to sleep together also reveals some very meaningful stuff about both of these people?
Yes, of course. That's what we're here for, man. This situation is fascinating. Let's start with him, right? Okay, to me, the most meaningful thing that this reveals is that he's drawn to this girl and he doesn't want to be the nice guy people pleaser anymore.
Right. This was kind of about Jessica, but in a way it's not about Jessica. Like you said, they both agree they don't see each other long-term romantically, which is an interesting, possibly not super credible detail in a way that makes this worse.
Yes, kind of, because it's like, well, if this girl isn't the one or somebody you're madly in love with, then why did you risk your whole friendship with Richard?
Exactly. It seems like a really crap trade. If you're going to trade your best friend for somebody, that person should be like your future wife, not like, well, she was cute and we get along, we hooked up before.
It's great on the billiards table. Like, what?
It makes absolutely no sense. So if he's just interested in having fun and getting more experience, there are loads and loads of people you can do that with. This sounds to me like scarcity mindset. Like, oh gosh, there's only one girl in the universe and my friend has her right now, but he's picking apples. Time for me to shine. Although he did also say he's not really into hooking up with strangers, but whatever. Everybody's a stranger until you get to know them, right? Maybe go get to know somebody else who's not going to nuke your entire social life. So it's like, are you just coming up with a reason to go after a girl who's super close to you because you have access? That's what I'm at with this.
Fair question. Also, let's remember that he was involved with Jessica first, and then somebody told her that Richard was into her, and she started a relationship with Richard. They broke up. She got together with Richard. He kind of breezed past that in the letter, but I wonder if that's part of the nice guy thing, part of why he was drawn to this whole situation. Like, did he just sit back while this girl he liked went off and chose another guy, and maybe that hurt a little bit, and now he's like, well, hey, I'm going to get her back. I have a chance. I'm going to reclaim something. I mean, look, that's a bummer, right? Like, there must have been a little bit of a wound there.
I think so. I think that's a good point. It could be this. We're speculating a little, but that would explain a lot. He liked her, and his best friend is like, I'm going for it, and he doesn't want to be like, no, I'm just kind of being a wimp, but I like her. He's like, yeah, go for it. They click, and he's like, damn it. Right? So that would explain a lot. Although it's also confusing because he's now saying, oh, clearly
Richard's her guy.
I'm not the one for her long term.
Right.
Richard is. Maybe that's true. Again, I don't really buy it. I think he's self-protecting here a little bit. It's hard to say. That doesn't add up for me. What I'm also trying to get at is Jessica was the first woman he saw, and he was like, all right, I'm tired of being this passive nice guy. I'm sick of not going after what I want. I want to feel alive, but I only want her a little bit, not a lot, because, after all, it's my best friend's girlfriend. None of that jives. And he did that at the expense of his friend. I feel like that's the real issue here. This lack of discipline thing, this classic masculine need to chase things and be victorious act.
Absolutely. That impulse is important for him to understand whether this was right or wrong from a moral standpoint. But the fact that he chose sleeping with Jessica over his friend, to your point, Jordan, that raises some interesting questions about how he feels about Richard, too. I'm with you. I almost wish this story were more like, look, I like Richard, but Jessica and I are soulmates, and I think like I'm going to die if I can't be with this person. And as much as that sucks, as a horrible situation, that's more important to me than my friendship with Richard. It would still be incredibly messy and hurtful, but at least I would understand what's at stake.
Yes. Okay. In college, I had a buddy, and he was dating this really cute girl, and I think I was single at the time, or I was having problems with the girl that I was with, or I didn't see myself long term. And my friend pulls me aside. We're drinking, and I was like, your girlfriend's really charming, man. He goes, look, here's the thing. She's great. She's not the one for me long term. We're different religions. She wants all these different things out of life. I am probably not going to date her for that long. I almost want to figure out how to transfer this relationship to you.
Wow.
Because you guys would be so good together, and she thinks you're awesome. And basically, I think she would date you if she wasn't with me. And I was like, oh, wow, this is really interesting. But this was two friends being like, yo, practical stuff aside, this girl's great. You should date her. She's not for me.
Right.
Like you said, that's what we were hoping happened here, right? But this is like the inverse of that situation. Also, anyway, in that above scenario that you mentioned, Jessica could have asked herself, if I'm feeling drawn to somebody I'm close with, maybe that means this relationship with Richard isn't the right one for me. Let me go sort that crap out before I sleep with my boyfriend's best friend without handling anything else.
The right way to handle this would be to break up with Richard first, then explore things with our friend if that's what she wants to do.
Yeah, or change the terms of their open relationship to include people they know if that's an option. Although I don't think Richard's going to be thrilled about this. Like, okay, fine. As long as it's not my best friend since childhood, fine. It's like, about that.
But your point is that they're kind of both at fault here. And man, that makes me feel even worse for Richard because he's kind of been betrayed by two of the closest people in his life. So rough.
It's brutal. The radio silence is deafening. So what do you do here? I mean, the simple answer is to take a huge step back, distance yourself from Jessica for a bit, see how all of this settles. But now that the deed is done, several times I assume, the damage is basically done. And I'm not sure we can tell you with total certainty what to do, because the right answer here, in my view anyway, is more about asking yourself some big questions about yourself and your relationships and figuring out what really matters to you. What I'd be asking myself is, how strongly do I feel about Jessica? Is this relationship truly meaningful, or is it a passing fling? And you got to be honest with yourself.
And do I want her, or do I want to be in touch with the part of myself that wants things and doesn't stop myself from going after them?
Yeah, that's a good one, Gabe. That's a huge piece here. It's an interesting question, whether he can separate the desire to chase the things he wants from the things themselves. Like, is he all hopped up on his libido, or is he hopped up on Jessica specifically, or is that ultimately the same thing?
It's tricky. It's hard to separate those two things out. I do think they're a bit different, but that's such a good question to ask himself, given his history of shutting down a lot of his desires and then possibly secretly resenting it, or, like stewing on some difficult feelings when he doesn't get what he really wants.
Of course. And hey, the other thing you need to figure out is how you feel about Richard. What role you want him to play in your life going forward, and you and his. Do you still care about him? Can he forgive you and still care about you at this point? Is this woman more important than your friendship? Less important, whatever? Do you want to bang buddy for another 6 months, or is that friendship potentially for decades to come? I'm not presupposing the answers here. I mean, maybe we kind of are in our tone, but these are just good questions for you to ask.
Jordan, this whole Jessica debacle, it's interesting. It's kicked up a lot of new questions and feelings for this guy. right? And they're all swirling around him in a very overwhelming way. And I feel like his job now is to just like pluck them from the air and go like, oh, interesting. There's a good question. What does that say about me? And slowly sort through what this relationship / mistake brought up. The one thing he can sort pretty easily, though, is this whole I can't control myself thing. I don't think he needs to go through life suppressing all of his feelings. I think it's pretty obvious from our response that we don't think that's the answer. The best case scenario here would have been to acknowledge his feelings for Jessica, sit with them for a bit, maybe talk to her about them, see how she was feeling, whether they were both on the same page, whether they were willing to invite this risk by getting involved with each other and how and when. That's one way to stay in control while still being in touch with his desires and with himself. But the fact that he feels out of control when a temptation kicks in, that's another thing for him to pluck and look at.
Yeah, the language he uses is very telling. Do I restrain myself? Should I avoid the temptation? Do I submit to my desires? Should I learn my lesson? I just get the sense that this is a guy who's kind of at the whim of big feelings. And again, be real, we're human. We're all at the whim of feelings at some point. But the goal, to your point, Gabe, is to get more curious about them, sit with them for a minute before texting your best friend's girl at 2 o'clock in the freaking morning. And maybe this guy struggles to do that, or the feelings just have a lot of pull over him. Maybe because, again, I was a nice guy for so long, I'm sick of being trampled. You know, it reminds me of, well, I hate to make this comparison, but you see these sort of angry guys on Reddit that are like, I'm sick of tired of this. And they blame women for, or other people for a lot of them not getting what they want out of life. I'm not getting the full-on incel vibe from this guy, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But it's a lot of the same stuff. Like, now it's my turn. And they're like, I'm going to be super selfish. But instead of just prioritizing themselves, they're like, oh, this means burning everything in my wake. And then a year later being like, why don't I have any friends? Oh, oops. You know, that's not good. Not a good strategy.
How does he advocate for himself and take himself seriously without damaging people around him or taking what isn't appropriate? Yeah. But this whole thing that you just said about the temptation and the struggle to deal with these big feelings might be why the middle ground feels so risky to him. He feels that he either needs to stay far away from this girl to stay safe, or he needs to go all in with her and risk losing his best friend. And hey, maybe that's true in the short term on some level. Maybe you guys do need some distance. That's fair. But in the bigger picture, what you could be working toward is a relationship with your feelings that allows you to tolerate the tension of these situations a little bit better. You know, something that makes room for all of these feelings, right? The desire, the excitement, the anxiety, and also the difficult ones you mentioned, the jealousy, the resentment, and gives you more control over how you behave and whom you share those feelings with.
That might be the biggest takeaway from this whole thing, that he doesn't need to suppress his impulses, but he doesn't need to be completely enthralled to them either.
Right.
So to zoom way out, it sucks things played out this way, but now that you're here, it's time to learn, to be kind to everybody involved, especially Richard, who's off on his own, just dealing with this somehow on his bunk bed in the apple orchard or whatever, and to be patient while the dust settles. So much can change, and a lot of it is outside your control now. The most important thing is how you move through this and what you take away from it. This mistake, and I'm putting mistake in air quotes because I actually think in some sense this had to happen for you to grow. This mistake is an opportunity for you to learn a lot about yourself, figure out which relationships to prioritize, and develop your values in situations like this, which you're already doing. So good luck, and anyone in an open relationship, take notes. This stuff can get messy if you're not prepared to manage it well. You know, maybe Richard will forgive you if you hook him up with one of the fine products and services that support this show. We'll be right back. This episode is sponsored in part by BetterHelp. Considering your next professional step, how exciting. Thinking about the possibilities of starting a family? Maybe you're thinking of relocating or reassessing a romantic relationship. Regardless of the life juncture you're navigating, therapy can act as your compass to the future, instilling in you the self-assurance to guide your life towards your chosen path. Therapy is not only for tackling life's heavy traumas, it's great for that too. It's also there for everyday folks like us, navigating the stress and uncertainty that come with major life decisions. Therapy can be your secret weapon for mastering the art of stress management, setting healthy boundaries, charting your path forward. Don't just vent to your friends, they're sick of it. They're not trained to help you anyway. Give therapy a shot. Check out BetterHelp. It's entirely online, no driving, no parking. It's designed for convenience. You answer a quick survey, you get matched up with a therapist. If you don't vibe with them, no problem. Switch anytime, doesn't cost a thing. 23,000 certified therapists, you're going to find somebody you match with. I definitely think it's a good step toward dipping your toes in the therapy waters.
Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/Jordan to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/Jordan.
This episode is also sponsored by Grammarly. Writing is an inevitable part of life. Job applications, crafting that perfect wedding speech, even just daily social media posts, it takes a long ass time. Well, Grammarly has a new AI-powered tool called Grammarly Go, which can streamline your writing. Grammarly Go doesn't just help with grammar, it adapts to your unique voice and offers assistance based on what you need. Running low on creative ideas happens to the best of us. Simply use prompts such as suggest ideas for taco truck decor or provide 10 potential video thumbnail taglines. With Grammarly Go, writer's block becomes a thing of the past, boosting your productivity and making writing enjoyable rather than a chore. Grammarly Go was super helpful when Jen needed help crafting a memorial speech for her late uncle, something she'd never had to do, by the way, and it was crucial to find the right words. You got to honor a loved one, you got to comfort the family in mourning. Grammarly Go helped find the perfect tone and even suggested ways to honor a loved one's memory. It was actually quite impressive. It's really a game changer and it's free to use.
You'll be amazed at what you can do with Grammarly Go. Go to Grammarly.com/go to download and learn more about Grammarly Go. That's GRAMMARLY.com/go.
Thank you for listening and supporting the show. Your support of our advertisers keeps the lights on. All deals, discount codes, and ways to support the show are at jordanharbinger.com/deals. Ask the AI chatbot. Email me, I'll shove the code right down your throat. Please consider supporting those who support the show. Now, back to Feedback Friday. Okay, what's next?
Dear Jordan and Gabe, last year, in an effort to make new friends, I started a tabletop gaming group. We typically meet up at one person's house weekly. Let's call him John. John is 10 to 15 years older than the rest of the group and is somewhat eccentric, but I've always thought of him as friendly and kind and been willing to overlook his minor annoyances. Shortly after inviting some new members to the group, there was an issue with John that we all addressed together. After that, we decided to have John and another member, Brad, split the responsibilities of leading the sessions. 8 months later, Brad texted me saying that he's tired of dealing with John's personality and can't handle him any longer. Upon discussing this with the rest of the group, we also learned that the only woman in the group has been made to feel uncomfortable by some of his comments. Nothing sexual in nature, but he has made some jokes rooted in stereotypes and prejudice. John struggles with social cues and doesn't understand that his sense of humor isn't always well received. Brad also expressed that he's controlling in the game, doesn't take feedback well, and frequently buys things for the game that he holds over our heads. All of this was enough for the group to decide to move on without him. I advocated for discussing this with him, but the others felt it would only prolong the inevitable. So Brad and I went to his house to talk. It felt like we fired him from a job. It was cold. Brad did most of the talking while I stared at my feet. Given that he's hosted us for over a year and we're friends, it feels disrespectful and unkind to end things the way we did. I've wrestled with guilt and anxiety ever since. John doesn't fully understand what he's done to rub everyone the wrong way. He said he wants to have a conversation with everybody and that if we could move past this, he would still like to be a member of the group. He feels like what we did to him was mean, and I agree, but I'm not sure if the rest of the group is willing to give him a second chance. What should I do here? Signed, give him the boot because it's hard, or show this guy our cards?
Oh man, this is sad. Poor John. You guys are probably like 35, he's pushing 50. This group is probably a huge part of his life, and the guy just cannot read the room. But then the other members, especially this woman, they're like, yeah, I don't love how John makes me fetch the iced tea from the kitchen and calls me skirt and buys custom miniatures for our Dungeons and Dragons games and then reminds everyone how he paid for them. You're welcome, guys. So I really feel for everyone here, including you, because you obviously have a lot of compassion for this guy and your loyalties are split. So candidly, I'm naturally more in the kick the super annoying tone-deaf man-child out of the group immediately camp because I have a hard time dealing with personalities like that. I just came to sip a hard kombucha and play Yahtzee with my friends, not listen to you crack awkward sexist jokes from a 1970s joke book you found at a yard sale, John. But as I've gotten older, I think I've really begun to appreciate that most people deserve one real chance to work on something. He's probably been struggling with this his whole life as well.
Well, I was about to say that, especially when you're dealing with a guy like John, who, I mean, he's not a total monster, right? He's not like a belligerent racist or an unmitigated a-hole or like physically dangerous. That's a different thing. He sounds terribly socially inept, right? He's just not good with feedback. He makes off-color jokes, which, yeah, that's dicey and maybe hurtful sometimes, but that might be more a symptom of his social challenges than his true beliefs. I do feel someone like that deserves at least a conversation.
Yeah, the fact that this dude was completely blindsided by this conversation tells me he's probably more clueless than malicious. And I'm just imagining the other scenario in which you're like, Settlers of Catan, anyone? And then like, you're just halfway through the game and it's like, guys, the Jews, am I right? And you're just like, oh God, that's a lot easier of a decision. The way this could have gone down is, listen, John, you're a valuable member of this group. You've been super generous with us. You've added a lot to our games. We really appreciate all of that. But as your friends, we feel we owe it to you to tell you that you've ruffled some feathers in the group. Unintentionally, I'm sure, and it's creating some tension that we'd like to resolve. I know this might be hard to take in. Our goal is not to make you feel bad in any way. This is just us pointing out some things that need to change if this group is going to continue harmoniously. Our hope is that you can take this on board and make things right with the group so we can go back to enjoying our games together. And then you gently lay out the issues, the jokes, the comments, holding things over your heads, the rigidity, all that crap. Help him see how the rest of the group hears those things. That's John's big blind spot, obviously. And then figure out what he would need to do to fix this, whether it's apologizing to the group or to Brad and this woman specifically, or just correcting his behavior and saying how it goes. Now, if you have this chat and in a month, John's back to cracking jokes like, hey, Rachel, did you forget to make us all sandwiches again? LOL, or whatever, then I think you have full license to say, sorry, man, this is exactly what we're talking about. In fact, pointing out in real time that this is exactly the type of crap we're talking about is probably what this guy actually needs. But why jump straight to the breakup, you know?
Yeah, good question. There's a big upside for John and for the group as a whole if he can grow. And if he can't grow, then you'll know that you did your part and he's not ready to get better and you won't feel the guilt and the anxiety. I mean, that's really the end of the story.
Yeah, I agree. The fact that you're being so thoughtful about John, even when he was the one who acted a fool, it says a lot about you. So don't lose that. Just marry it with a little more courage to have some occasionally tough conversations. It's not easy. This situation, it sucks, but it is necessary sometimes so you guys can play Battleship or Uno or Settlers of Catan or whatever it is without a side of regressive misogyny and nerd flexing. Good luck. You can reach us Friday at jordanharbinger.com. Please keep your emails concise. Use descriptive subject lines. If you're finding dead squirrels in the mailbox, your stepdad's got your nudes, or your borderline wife got pregnant with another dude and made your life living hell, whatever's got you staying up at night lately, hit us up Friday at jordanharbinger.com. We're here to help, and we keep every email anonymous. Okay, next up.
Hi, Jordan and Gabe. I'm a 28-year-old woman, and I recently got my heart broken by a man who's 11 years older than me. Our relationship only lasted a month, but within that short time, we formed what appeared to be a sincere bond. We lived 90 miles apart, but the distance didn't bother us. We clicked well emotionally and intellectually, and we were looking for the same qualities in a partner. When we weren't together on the weekends, we were texting, emailing, or FaceTiming every day. We even made personal Spotify playlists for each other. I can say with complete confidence that I had never met anyone like him before, and we were both excited to see how our relationship would progress. A few weeks ago, I spent the night at his place, and that was also the first time we had been intimate. He was very respectful, and it was obvious that we enjoyed each other's company. 2 days later, we had been corresponding intermittently, yet something felt off. He finally emailed me canceling our plans for the following weekend and ultimately broke it off, admitting that our age difference was starting to become an issue for him. He said that he didn't want to lead me on and that he couldn't see himself falling in love with me. I was completely blindsided and shocked by the whole thing. I told him how devastated and angry I was that he came to that conclusion without trying to talk it out, especially because we had seen each other just a few days before. He insisted that it wasn't about sex, but it still left me feeling taken advantage of. I might sound melodramatic, but I keep replaying our last interaction and wondering if there was something that I might have said or done wrong. I put so much trust in this person, and it stings because I finally felt seen by a romantic partner, and that's an incredibly rare feeling for me. Am I overanalyzing this entire relationship? Am I justified in feeling this hurt? How do I get over a betrayal by someone that I thought would never hurt me? Signed, stuck in grief and disbelief at the fact this love was all too brief.
Oh, man, I'm sorry things played out this way. This is obviously a very painful experience. To find somebody you connect with on several important levels, to then go be intimate with them, trust them, start getting excited about a future with them, and then find out that they suddenly feel differently, and then bam, it's over. That is very difficult. There's no way around it. So I know how distressing that must be, and I'm very sorry that you're hurting. This is interesting, though, because there's no way for you to know, and no way we can know exactly what's in this guy's head and heart. All you're left with is what he told you, that the age thing was an issue, that he didn't see a future together, that he didn't want to lead you on, which, let's just appreciate, that is maddening. Not just that he feels differently, but that you don't have access to more information about why he feels differently, which is absolutely his choice. And who knows, maybe there's ultimately not much to talk about, but it does deprive you of the information and the closure that you would have liked, and that sucks.
Yeah, what's so interesting to me about our letter is this is how so many breakups work, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most of them, I'd say. I think this is a pretty classic case of that ambiguous loss concept we've talked about on the show from time to time.
Sometimes the two parties just don't feel the same things or want the same things, or they do want the same things, but they don't have the capacity to explore them right now anyway. You know, sometimes one person knows that the other is right from the get-go, and it takes the other party a little bit longer to decide. And then sometimes there's another variable like age or sex or distance. These things might not seem like a factor at first, and then all of a sudden they can become one. So I wonder if what you're angriest at is just this one difficult fact, which is you can't change other people, and you can't make them feel what they don't feel, and you can't force them to talk to you if they don't want to. And you can't have, to Jordan's point, all the access to them that you wish you could have to make sense of things or feel better.
In my experience, that is the hardest part about a breakup. And the really annoying thing is it's absolutely non-negotiable. When things break down,
right,
whether you get dumped or you lose a job or someone dies or an offer falls through, whatever the loss is, you kind of bump up against the hard reality of the world, and you realize how little power you really have.
Or you realize that the only power you have is in how you respond to the loss and what you choose to take away from it.
Right, which is actually a considerable power, but it's not the power most of us wish we had when somebody goes away.
Right.
The power we want is love me, stay, tell me why, right? But that's not on the menu here. So are you overanalyzing this entire relationship? Probably not. I think it's pretty normal to dissect a relationship after it ends and replay certain moments. You're trying to understand what happened. You're wondering what role you played in this, what role he played. That seems appropriate. What I would keep an eye on is what you're trying to get out of that analysis. It's one thing to be curious about why a relationship ended. It's another to torture yourself or to try to give yourself a sense of control by reliving certain moments over and over, or to obsess for months and months without coming to any new insights. That's a different thing. But again, this is part of the power. You just can't know whether something you did or said played a role here. I think it's equally possible that this guy had his own reasons for ending the relationship, and that nothing you could have said or done would have changed the outcome here. But after a breakup, I think we often fixate on the most painful interpretation. We assume we did something wrong, as opposed to appreciating that the other person might have responded to us in a certain way, or that it just wasn't the right fit.
Well, ruminating on the relationship might also be a way to cope with that powerlessness, because she can't make him talk to her or give it another shot, but she can replay certain moments and imagine ways she could have controlled the outcome better, if only in her mind.
For sure. But again, she just doesn't know. And one of her projects right now, it seems to me, is learning to make peace with that.
Right.
So are you justified in feeling this hurt? I'd say it's normal to feel hurt and confused when somebody leaves you at a particularly vulnerable moment, especially when a connection like this is very rare for you. But with a little more time and distance, maybe you can hold that hurt alongside some other feelings. Like, for example, that this guy let you know clearly and early on that things weren't going to work out, which is still very painful, but it was the right thing to do rather than dragging things out and leading you on. Or the fact that maybe you got a little ahead of yourself. Maybe you got caught up in this idea of a future with this guy before you had enough data that he was on the same page too. Everyone does that in love to some degree, so please don't beat yourself up for this. Just appreciating that might have played a role in how devastating this felt.
Great point, Jordan. It's so hard to stay grounded and present in a new relationship, isn't it? Like there's a lot of fantasy at work in the early stages of a romantic relationship, and that's when a lot of these stories get created. They almost want to create themselves in your mind. It's kind of wild. So to answer your last question, how do I get over a betrayal by somebody I thought would never hurt me? Well, I actually think there are a couple assumptions buried in that question that are very interesting. They might be worth looking at. And the first one is that this was a betrayal. You know, I absolutely appreciate why it feels like one, but I think what you'll find in time is that this guy made the decision that was right for him for reasons you might not ever fully know, and that letting you know at this point was probably the best outcome. Ultimately, you and this guy were not compatible, full stop. It doesn't mean it wasn't a meaningful relationship while it lasted. It doesn't mean you guys didn't really connect in some way. None of this makes it less painful right now, but it's important to remember that if you guys were truly compatible, you almost certainly wouldn't find yourself in this situation. So it's worth reflecting on whether this is truly a betrayal or just a massive disappointment. I think the devastation you feel is very normal and very real, but the meaning you attach to it will help determine just how painful it is and also how you're going to cope with all of this.
It's really an interesting question, Gabe, because what makes something a betrayal exactly? Betrayal implies disloyalty, right? But was this guy really being disloyal, or was he being loyal to himself by being honest about what he wanted, and in a weird way, actually kind of loyal to her by being upfront? And I don't mean to minimize the pain she's in whatsoever, but you're right. There's a story in that concept of he betrayed me, and that story is probably meaningful too. It's like almost like there was a promise that wasn't explicit or wasn't made at all that existed only in her It's a covert contract. Remember that term where one side has the idea in their head and the other side is completely unaware of it?
Yes, and that might even hold the key to how she interpreted a lot of things.
A covert contract.
I would look
I've
at is the
never
idea
heard of
that this
that.
was somebody who would never hurt you. I get that you didn't expect him to hurt you. Of course, I get that. But I wonder if there's a part of you that didn't want to believe that things could go differently, or that you wouldn't be as vulnerable as you were. The reality is that anybody we care about and any situation we chase has the potential to devastate us and to put us in touch with some very difficult feelings, right? Like, them's the rules. And side note, I think that's how you know something is truly valuable to you. If you don't feel vulnerable, if some part of you is not on the line in some sense, then you're either chasing the wrong thing or maybe you're self-protecting. So again, don't mean to minimize your anger here either. It's totally valid, but I'm just inviting you to consider whether part of the anger you feel is realizing that anyone, including somebody you really connected with, kind of has the potential to break your heart.
Yeah, that's another hard reality we come up against in a breakup, that the other person doesn't necessarily owe it to you to spare you any specific feelings. It's brutal, but it is so important. So I hope this gives you some new lenses on this breakup. I'm so sorry you're going through it right now. As you can tell, we know how hard it is. I promise this will get better with time, even if it doesn't feel that way now. It always does. But in the meantime, one of the best things you can do is try not to have too many judgments about this guy or yourself, and just try to appreciate these new feelings, what they've revealed about you, how you operate in a relationship, what you want. The great news is that you were willing to have a deep experience with another person, and when the right guy comes along, this will all be pretty wonderful. Mostly wonderful. Love always sucks sometimes, right? I guess. But you clearly have a big heart, and that is such a gift, so take care of it. You know what else will blindside you, Gabriel? The crazy good deals on the products and services that support the show. We'll be right back. This episode is sponsored in part by Momentous. Live Momentous.
I'm going to pause it right there. Yeah, I've been having a few internet issues. The multicam stream is still working. It's like showing 98% done. But I think what I'm going to do next is possibly try to upload the individual files into a online folder. Do some more research on multicam editing. Yeah, I got new. Oh, this is a different character. What is it? Auto rifle, pulse. I guess I already have machine gun and void. Cool. So at least I won't be completely empty of bounties at the beginning of the season. I should be going to the Last Wish wall. Getting some Last Wish weapons that I could transmog or whatever they call it. Oh shit! Why was I about to? I thought that was a piece of armor for a second. I almost dismantled that. I wonder if you can dismantle the whole stack, or does it do one by one? Yeah. It says void volatility, and it's a void day. On that note, however, I think I might just have to take a break. Yeah, I don't really play for very long, unfortunately. But I will be back. Bye-bye.